Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and in this video I want to talk about what binge eating recovery actually looks like. I think there are a lot of expectations that you may have about what life would be like if you weren't binge eating anymore, and I think for some people, maybe for quite a few people, the idea of what recovery is supposed to look like, this shiny version of recovery where you defeated this binge eating thing and you never struggle with food anymore and you feel really comfortable in your body and life is just a million times easier. I think having these quite high and often unrealistic expectations is a big part of what keeps people stuck. So I wanted to share some of the expectations that I think some of you might have and maybe the reality of it as well. So the first expectation is that recovery means you will be in control of your food. The reality actually is yes, you won't be as out of control as you were, but it doesn't mean you're entirely in control either. We have very powerful appetites, and part of recovery is recognizing that if you try to cage your appetite, you wake the beast. So recovery actually involves having a really high level of respect for this appetite. When you respect what it's trying to do and you befriend it, then you're going to have a much easier relationship with it. It doesn't mean you control it. It just means that you're able to have a little bit more give and take, a little bit more, I use the word cautiously, but like gentle negotiation with your appetite. And expectation number 2 is when I've recovered, I'm going to do all the things that I didn't do when I was still struggling with binge eating. I'm going to wear certain clothes, I'm going to date, I'm going to go on a beach holiday, I'm going to be more sociable, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. And the reality is I don't think it works very well. I think it holds people back if you are in that place where you're saying, I am going to wait till I'm recovered and then I'm going to start living my life. I think the reality of it is actually often saying to ourselves, I'm going to live my life now in order to recover. Expectation number 3 goes something like this. I know recovery is hard, but if I just find an expert and they lay out these steps for me, I will get there. And the reality is there is no one-size-fits-all approach to binge eating recovery. I don't think there's any one program that is going to perfectly fit you. You may be on this quest to try and find this answer outside of yourself. There must be someone out there, some expert that is going to say the right thing that's going to change things for me. We look out there for the answer, when actually the reality is quite often recovery means going inwards and asking some difficult questions and feeling some difficult feelings. Another expectation, which I really believed, I thought if I can recover from binge eating, I can do anything. And I used to believe this because binge eating was just the hardest challenge I'd ever faced in my life. So I was convinced that life would feel easy if I didn't have this massive challenge in my life. And the reality is that life is challenging. And don't get me wrong, life is much better than when I was struggling with binge eating, but it's not easy. It's not this sort of smooth sail that I was really expecting once I'd conquered like the big problem in my life. Expectation. I have to develop strong willpower and discipline in order to recover. The reality is that this is not about willpower and discipline. I think people who struggle with binge eating have a lot of willpower. It's just that the will is split. They're in conflict. So rather than it being about willpower, it's about reducing the inner conflict. It's about recognizing and self-care and emotional tolerance and self-compassion and all these other much more wishy-washy concepts that the brain doesn't necessarily like very much because they sound too abstract. But they're incredibly powerful concepts and tools and skills that we can develop that quite often you will need in order to recover from binge eating and feel better at the other side of it. Expectation. I need to just figure out the right way to eat. The reality of this is yes and no. I don't like the word right because it implies there's something wrong as well, but it's figuring out a way to eat that feels balanced, that takes into account all of your needs, like your needs for social contact, your emotional needs, your physical needs, your psychological needs. It's building a structure and a framework around food that feels like, okay, like I can do this. I don't feel restricted. I'm not going to trigger off restriction. And at the same time, I'm not using food all the time to keep going into oblivion and to escape. Figuring out how to eat is around flexibility as well, and being able to become more attuned to your body. But it's not about finding this sort of ideal framework that you're going to eat within, because that just can become, especially with the all or nothing thinking, right, that just can become another rigid concept that can feel confining and may still be triggering off binge urges if it's not flexible enough. I think there's this other expectation as well of, I will know when I'm recovered. Like, it will be obvious. And I think that the reality of that is there's quite a long period of time, like 18 months, maybe even 2 years, where I sort of thought of myself as semi-recovered. In hindsight, I thought of it as sort of semi-recovered. And because it's not this magical place where you arrive and you put your flag down and you're like, I'm here, I've arrived, I've recovered. Actually, recovery can often be about finding your way back to balance when food gets a bit wobbly, because there are times probably when food is going to get wobbly, maybe even a time when you binge again. But I think recovery is about learning how to recover from binges. It's not always about necessarily being in balance 100% of the time. And I see it when people feel like they've been doing well for a while and then they binge. They think that means, oh, I thought I was recovered and now I'm not. But recovery is about, if you binge, like, how do you bring yourself back into balance? How do you want to meet yourself when food is challenging, rather than assuming that you're going to get to a place where it's just, you never have to give it a second thought anymore. I don't even like the word recovery. I've used it a lot in this video. I still haven't found a word that is better and that communicates what it is that I'm trying to talk about. But rather than thinking of it as this linear journey somewhere that you arrive, maybe you could think of it as each time you find yourself in balance with food, you are recovered. And there may be times where you feel knocked out of that. But if you think of it as arrival, anytime food's difficult, you feel like you've gone backward. And that, I don't think, is psychologically good for you when you're trying to heal your relationship with food. I think it's something that keeps people stuck and believing that they're never going to be able to do it. So I think I've covered most of the expectations, certainly ones that I had to unlearn, and maybe some of them you resonate with as well. Have you got other expectations of what you think recovery is? If so, I'd love to hear them. Pop them in the chat below. But thank you for watching. If you are watching this at the time of its release, I won't be around to respond to any of the comments because I will be contemplating life on a silent retreat. So I will see you next week.